A very good morning from the capital Jakarta, Indonesia. President Joko Widodo and Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong today attended the annual leaders retreat taking place at the Presidential Palace of Bogor to further promote bilateral relations between the two countries that have been flourishing in recent years. The annual gathering between the two state leaders in Bogor today will be quite special as it is the last retreat for the two outgoing leaders who will end their terms later on this year.
A very special meeting indeed, and the two leaders will review the significant progress they have made on bilateral cooperation during their respective tenures. And today, in the next few minutes, we are going to hear the result of the leaders' retreat between President Joko Widodo as well as Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. And we are also going to have a dialogue with two very special guests who are in the studio and also another later on through Zoom. One is Mbak Syafiah Muhibat, Deputy Executive Director for Research at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS. And the other one is Bapak Eko Listianto, Vice Director of Institute for Development of Economic and Finance, or INDEF. And both of them will share their insight on the current and future of Indonesia's economic cooperation with the neighboring country. Well, let's begin. I am Luisa Kusnandar.
And I'm Rahmat Idris. This is the special report of Singapore's Prime Minister visit to Indonesia. As we wait for live pictures coming in from the President Palace of Bogor in West Java, let's just go on ahead with our conversation here in the studio. Mbak Fifi, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Such a pleasure to see you again. Always a treasure to have you here for our conversations. And also a very special occasion, as we mentioned earlier, for the two state leaders to meet today, their final annual retreat in Indonesia and Singapore that has been, if not mistaken, taken place for 7 times. This is the last one. What do you make of it?
Well, it's always interesting. I mean, Indonesia-Singapore bilateral relations is, of course, I would have to say one of the top, priorities of Indonesia's bilateral relations, due to its, close proximity in terms of location, and also because, Singapore is the biggest investor in Indonesia, and a bunch of other important political security cooperation going on as well. So, of course, every time the two leaders meet, it's always an important occasion. Always very concrete outcome is done every time they have a meeting, a number of agreements. The latest one, for example, last year, who was put into effect earlier in March this year, a number of frameworks of cooperation. So I think each and every time the two leaders meet, it's always a very important occasion.
Indeed. Now, let's go and say hello to Pak Eko Listianto from INDEF through Zoom. Good morning, Pak Eko.
Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to our special report. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Now, Pak Eko, as we have mentioned before, that this is a very sweet momentum for these two leaders because this will be their last time meeting at this leaders retreat as the head of the countries. As we have heard just now from Mbak Syafiah Muhibat about this leaders meeting being very special for both of them. What's your opinion on this?
Yes, of course, this is a very special meeting, I think, because Singapore is one of our neighbor, close neighbor with Indonesia, and also I agree with Mbak Fifi because their investment to us is so big, and even the biggest one in the world for Indonesia. So I think this is a great chance for both of this country to make this cooperation greater, more greater, and also because actually we want to be a developed country as a Singapore. So I think there is a lot of lesson learned that we can share, and also Singapore try to share to us to make sure that both of this country will become, especially for Indonesia, become a developed country like next Singapore, maybe we hope in 2045, right?
Right. Mas Eko, just to piggyback on what you've just said, right now at the presidential palace of Bogor, apparently the meeting of the two state leaders, the annual retreat, the final one is now currently taking place. We see that a very attractive conversations are currently taking place between President Joko Widodo and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong there, although we can't make up the audio at this moment in time. But back to you, Mas Eko, you mentioned briefly that Singapore indeed for a long time now has become the biggest trading partner of Indonesia. So what do you think are some of the most essential highlights of the economic cooperations between Indonesia and Singapore up to this point?
Okay, Pak Rahmat. I think one of the important cooperation Indonesia and also Singapore, it's in the Singapore has a wide network, I think, for the trade. So I think this is one of our chance to expand our trade economic, especially in a trade partnership, because we know that Indonesia still has a limited network, especially to the other country. So I think Singapore is one of the best choice to make sure that we also connected to the world, especially in finance sector. We know Singapore is one of the our center of finance, I think, in Asia and also in the world. So I think this is a good strategy if we always maintain our cooperation with Singapore.
Mas Eko, could you please elaborate more on what kind of things should we focus on this leaders retreat this year? As you know, last year, Indonesia and Singapore have made 15 agreements for bilateral cooperation. Some of them focus on, say, digital economy and sustainability. Well, this year we have more challenges, especially in the geopolitical terms. What kind of areas should we focus on between these two countries to make us better in the future?
Okay, to match with our strategy, especially in the long term, our long term strategy, I think some area we can improve. When the bystand is about the sustainability development, or I think in like we develop a green economy. This is a big chance for us because we know that. So many banks from Singapore that also develop this issue, also concerned about the sustainability issue. So I think this is also become our opportunity to cooperate with Singapore. And the other is also, of course, about the digitalization or economic digitalization, because we know that Singapore is one of the country that has a big capital, also has a big we call it angel investor, and this is also become opportunity for our startup in Indonesia. And the third is about our new capital city, EKN. So we know that our government focus on this how to develop our new capital city. So I think one of the lesson learned, and also investment that we can try to invite to our new capital cities from Singapore, because Singapore has a lot of experience how to build a big city with the future infrastructure. Right?
Right.
That
Future infrastructure, that's very
exactly. I
interesting.
mean, that is a good point right there. I mean, with this Nusantara city, we're starting from zero. It's a clean
Exactly.
slate. And I mean, like, we have a really good example from Singapore being a very, it's a small country, but then they have developed it really well.
That's right.
Especially now we can implement technology in.
Right.
So, yeah.
If Singapore has a humongous ships on top of hotels at Marina Bay Sands, we'll have a humongous Garuda in front of the presidential palace
idea.
over in IKN. So that's something to look forward to. Allow me to go over to you, Mbak Fifi. Give us an overview of the landscape of political affairs between Indonesia and Singapore up to this point, meaning that not only they are one of our biggest trading partners, but one of the closest neighbors of our country.
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, if two countries with such close proximity like Indonesia and Singapore, there's always bound to be, problems and challenges in terms of political security issues. But things have been developing in a very steady pace. And I think the most important is that in 2022, there was an agreement signed in Bintan. We call that the expanded framework were signed in 2022. And this includes three very important political security cooperation between Indonesia and Singapore. So the first is the airspace management. You might have heard of the flight information region.
Yeah.
And then there's the extradition treaty. And then the last one is the defense pact. So all of these three issues were signed in 2022, were discussed last year during the leaders retreat last year in Singapore when President Jokowi went to Singapore, and was finally put into force just last month in March 2024. So these three issues have been, long-standing, sometimes issues of contention between Indonesia and Singapore, especially with regards to the airspace management, because it's so sensitive. It relates to territorial issues as well. So it's really a major step forward in terms of the bilateral relations between Indonesia and Singapore.
What can we follow through in terms of our cooperation with Singapore? I mean, there's so much we can learn from Singapore so far. And regarding, in a matter of weeks, Singapore will have a new leader, and also we will also have a new leader, President Prabowo Subianto President-elect. So what can be done to improve this?
Well, yes, definitely. If you notice, Lawrence Wong, who will take over from the current PM, is in Jakarta, actually, along with the entourage. And I think to state how important this visit is, not only Lawrence Wong comes along, but there are 7 other ministers joining the entourage coming in from Singapore. So that shows how important this is. And I think the new Singapore PM is looking forward, starting from now to actually start, with the improving the bilateral relations already.
All right. Okay. We will continue our dialogue in just a short moment. But first, let's talk about this annual gathering between President Joko Widodo in Bogor that's happening today. This will be quite a special event because it will be the last retreat for the two leaders who will end their terms later on this year.
Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong is visiting Bogor to attend the Singapore-Indonesia Leaders Retreat. This will be Prime Minister Lee's 7th and final Leaders Retreat with President Joko Widodo. The two leaders will review the significant progress made on bilateral cooperation during their respective tenures. Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong is set to take over from PM Lee on May 15th, while Indonesian Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto, having won the country's presidential election on February 14th, will succeed Widodo in October. At the annual gathering, President Joko Widodo, more popularly called Jokowi, and PM Lee are expected to take stock of the significant progress made on bilateral cooperation during their respective tenures. This includes the 3 landmark pacts between the two countries that were inked in January 2022 and which officially came into March in 2024, which deal with airspace management, defense cooperation, and extradition. At the retreat, PM Lee and President Jokowi will also endorse additional agreements in areas such as defense, digital economy, sustainability, and human capital development, said so by the Prime Minister's office. The statement noted that both countries have made advances in bilateral cooperation in a wide variety of other areas, including healthcare, trade and investment, and financial cooperation. The Prime Minister will be accompanied on his visit by Deputy Prime Minister Wong, Senior Minister and Coordinating Minister for National Security Teo Chee Hean, Defense Minister Ng En Hen, Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan, Education Minister Chan Chun Sing, Social and Family Development Minister, Second Minister for Health, and Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs Masago Zulkifli, Health Minister Ong Ye Kum, and Manpower Minister and Second Minister for Trade and Industry Tan See Lang. On April 15th, PM Lee made the long-awaited announcement that he will step down on May 15th after nearly 2 decades in office and hand power to his deputy, Lawrence Wong. The choice of Wong was no surprise. Back in April 2022, he was named as the leader of the People's Action Party's fourth generation team after Lee's first designated successor, Heng Swee-keat, stepped aside a year prior. The 51-year-old entered politics in 2011 after being elected as a member of parliament in West Coast GRC. He was given his first political office 2 weeks after the election as Minister of State for Education and Defense. In the 2015 general election, Wong moved to contest in the New Marsiling UT GRC, where he has been a core minister ever since. By then, he had risen steadily through the ranks with positions in various ministries, including the Ministry of Culture, Community, and Youth, where he was appointed acting minister in 2012 and made full minister 2 years later.
Right. Also mentioned there on the landmark park that has been, or pacts rather, that have been agreed on between Indonesia and Singapore, the airspace management, the defense cooperation and extraditions. And you mentioned also, Mbak Fifi, that the so-called FIR, the Flight Information Region, has been quite a thorn between our two countries that have been discussed over and over again. It's been a push and pulls back and forth, and now it's enforced for over a month now. What more can you tell me about this?
Well, I mean, yeah, airspace management has been quite a problematic issue between Indonesia and Singapore. I mean, considering Singapore has very limited airspace, so of course it has to use the airspace of a neighboring country for its commercial purposes mostly. So the FIR itself, it's related to a certain airspace above the Riau Islands, if you recognize the map. And it actually been managed by Singapore since 1946. So it's been a long time. It's Indonesia's territory, but it's been managed by Singapore for its commercial purposes since 1946. And it's a legal process. It was mandated at the time by the authority, the International Civil Organization, so Civil Aviation Organization. So Singapore insists that, you know, FIR has never been an issue of sovereignty. It's just because they need to use the airspace for commercial air traffic and to be efficient and so on. But of course, for an Indonesian point of view, because it relates to territorial issues, it becomes very sensitive because we can't, well, simply, it seems that we can't manage our own airspace territory. But, you know, all these contentions have been resolved in the 2022 agreement, and it was thoroughly discussed again last year, both at the leaders level and so many other layers of bureaucracy as well. So, in March this year, it's actually put into force as well. So it's, like I said, it's a huge step forward in terms of managing some of these points of contention between Indonesia and Singapore.
Well, besides that airspace management, there's also defense cooperation and as well as extradition. Can you explain to us more about this?
Well, yeah, the Defense Cooperation Agreement is also another issue that is quite problematic. The agreement, the DCA, was actually signed quite a number of years ago, and I think it was during the SBY era. But it has gone through a process of legislation. So, but it was always pending in terms of being ratified here in Indonesia, because a lot of the lawmakers see that there are issues of sovereignty that might be problematic in the DCA. But it was finally ratified last year, I think, no, 2022. It was finally ratified in 2022, and now the process is ongoing. And I think a lot of issues, there are areas that Indonesia and Singapore can definitely continue to cooperate on, maritime security, for example, and a number of other issues as well.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned briefly, Bafifi, that this is not an issue of sovereignty in terms of the flight information region, but rather the authority of Singapore to sort of manage the airspace for the economic purposes. But up to the time that is enforced just in March, what more can you tell us about? Is it a shared authority between the two countries, or do we have more say within our own airspace and territorial issue? Because it is, for lack of better words, pertaining to the sovereignty of a nation, be it the land borders or even the air borders.
Sure. I mean, the technical details is a little bit complicated even for me to explain.
Probably not even diverse to public, is it? So.
Sure. But it's I think it's a matter of both technical and perspective as well. I mean, for an Indonesian point of view, of course, we have the need to manage all of our territorial integrity, both on land, on sea, and on air as well. But from a Singapore point of view, they need to use the airspace for an efficient, basically commercial air traffic. So we can that if you know put into details can be quite complicated, but I think in details is that Singapore has the authority to use a certain airspace without having the need to inform Indonesia regularly, unless it's used then again for a joint exercise. Then it's a different
military purposes.
Exactly. Then it's a different agreement,
altogether.
issue altogether. But all in all, I think some of these issues of contention have been managed in the new agreement, and the airspace management is now back to Indonesia's authority, so to say. But I think Singapore can still use it using a certain new regulations and new process of permits. Yeah.
Now, before we go deeper into what kind of bilateral cooperation that can be improved between Indonesia and in Singapore, let's go back to Mas Eko Listianto in INDEF, where we are still discussing about the challenges that these two countries are facing. Mas Eko, can you explain to us more in what economic sectors can be improved between Indonesia and Singapore?
Yeah, some area we can improve to develop this cooperation between Indonesia and Singapore. I think one of the biggest challenge is in human resource, because Indonesia and Singapore there is a big gap, I think, in
There's a
our
huge gap there.
human resource quality. So if we want to improve our cooperation, so we need to make sure that also Indonesia can, we need to make sure that human resource in Indonesia also have a same level, especially in the competitiveness with the Singapore itself. Because in the future, Singapore has become developed country, and in the future they will improve their sustainable development. They will improve digitalization. So we will have or we will get big advantage if we develop our human resource as our focus, to make sure that in the future cooperation between Singapore and Indonesia have a big advantage for both of these countries.
Right, Mas Eko, we are highly and extremely intrigued when you said that there's this huge gap of the quality of human resources between our countries. And just to note the fact that the civil servants of Singapore has the biggest wage or salary, not only in the region, but in the whole wide world. And what more can be done to sort of follow suit with the way that Singaporeans have been able to manage and to elevate the quality of the human resources for that to be adapted to Indonesia, Mas Eko?
Yeah, I think one of our, maybe the next step that we can improve is in education, I think, because we know there is huge global talent in Singapore, but we just maybe Indonesia also has a good talent actually, but it's still limited if we compare to a Singapore citizen in Singapore in average. So I think if we push our education sector, I mean, in cooperation with Singapore, I think it will make our human development will be increased, and also, after that uh, we will also the effect of this the increasing of this quality of human resource, of course, in the wage and their welfare, right? Because so the first step is we need to make closer in education sector, I think, Pak Rahmat.
Well, in terms of numbers, if we talk about numbers of human resources, Indonesia's human resources are limitless. I mean,
Yeah.
but then compared to Singapore, which is like a much smaller country, but then they have managed this really well. And you said we need to push this in terms of the education sector, but this has been going on for, for a
Quite a
long
while,
time, but
yeah.
our quality has not improved yet. What is going on? Is that our lack of management skills here in Indonesia? What is the problem here?
Okay, Mbak Luisa, because we talk about the different number, I think, about the different number of our citizen. So actually, in some area in Indonesia, our human resource is also good. I mean, like in Jakarta, and also in some of the region they have a big university. Also, they have a good talents. But in most of Indonesia, the quality of our human development is still low, below, of course, below Singapore. So, how to make sure that this gap will uh, we eliminate in the future? I think we need uh, more to invite maybe university from Singapore or education from Singapore to also share their lesson learned, how to maintain our human resource, especially our young generation, to compete with the what we call it world standard, yeah, because right now we need to compete with not just Singapore, I think, with the world standard, to make sure that in every cooperation, also with the Singapore country, we have opportunity in every area, I think.
Right, and we've also had plenty of our students coming into Singapore to study. Nanyang University, for example, one of the major destinations for our students to go to. But during this, all of this exchange of educational and also the networkings that we've been establishing with Singapore, we've yet to come to that point in time where we can safely say that the quality has been up to par up to this point. So what are we missing exactly, Mas Eko, in your point of view?
Yeah, I think so far in education sector cooperation, it's just uh, we can say maybe just Indonesia send their student of college to Singapore, but the I think there is no like a researcher from Singapore, and also maybe lecturer from Singapore in I mean in a big number to teach in Indonesia. I think this is so the gap is still happen, because it just we call it one direction, Indonesia to Singapore, but not Singapore to Indonesia, to make sure that there is acceleration in our education, quality of our education, I think. So
Right, thank
maybe
you.
in the future, more Nanyang University lecturer come to teach to us. It's better solution for our cooperation in education.
Right. Not only Nanyang, but we're also very proud of our ITBs and all of our polytechnics here in the countries. But also the fact that there was this phenomenon, Luisa and also Maseko and Fifi, that a lot of our youngsters have been quite interested to change, to switch citizenship from being an Indonesian to being a Singaporean. So that's something that we're going to discuss later on in the next part of our program.
That's right. But now let's talk more about the bilateral cooperation. As close neighbors, Singapore and Indonesia have become a strategic partner for each other so far, since the two countries have established diplomatic relations in 1967. Now, since then, with regular cooperation at all levels, the nations have always been looking at new opportunities for the mutual benefits of the two countries. Let's take a look.
Indonesia and Singapore formed bilateral ties just a month after the establishment of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, and two of the 5 founding members of the regional bloc. Both nations are also members of the Non-Aligned Movement and APEC. Over the years, Indonesia and Singapore have maintained regular exchanges of high-level visits, underpinned by strong economic cooperation across a wide range of sectors, including business, health, defense, and the environment. In the past decade, Singapore has consistently been among Indonesia's top foreign investors.
Very happy to be here because
history shows that relations between Indonesia and Singapore began in the period of ancient kingdoms, when the Straits region was part of Sriwijaya domain in the 7th century. The Nagara Kretagama, a Javanese script written in 1365, also referred to a settlement on the island called Temasek, or Sea Town. In the early 19th century, Singapore was under British control as Straits settlement and later as Crown Colony. At the same period, Indonesian archipelago gradually fell under control of Dutch East Indies Company and Dutch East Indies. After the independence of Indonesia in 1945 and the separation of Singapore from Malaysia in 1965, both countries opened bilateral diplomatic ties in 1966. In 1967, they founded ASEAN together with Thailand, the Philippines, and Malaysia to strive for peace and stability in the region. The formal diplomatic relations was established between Singapore and Indonesia in September 1967. In trade and commerce, Singapore is important for Indonesia to provide the link to trade with the rest of the world, as the island nation is located on the busiest sea lane in Strait of Malacca, serving as one of the world's main commercial hub. Meanwhile, Indonesian business is also important for Singapore. Trade and commerce is the main common motivation of both nations' foreign relations, and each counterpart are main trade partners of each other. Singapore continues to be Indonesia's one of the most strategic trading partner and the biggest in ASEAN. Indonesia is also Singapore's one of the largest trading partners in ASEAN. Total bilateral trade value in 2023 reached 69 billion Singapore dollar, making Indonesia Singapore's 6th largest trading partner in ASEAN. Singapore has also been Indonesia's top source of foreign direct investment since 2014, recording $15.4 billion of FDI in 2023. Both countries have so far maintained regular exchanges and close cooperation at all levels, including at the personal level between Indonesians and Singaporeans. There have also been strong ties at the corporate levels between the business people from the two countries, as well as at the government levels.
this is the first time I saw the photographs, but being here is
Indonesia and Singapore are long-standing partners, and there are still potentials for both countries to explore and further cooperation. Let's see the new ideas and partnership between Indonesia and Singapore in grabbing new opportunities and advance areas of mutual interest of the benefit of both nations.
Well, there you have it, a very special report on the flourishing relations between Indonesia and Singapore all this time, even with the final visit of the annual leaders retreat taking place right now at the presidential palace of Bogor, West Java. Let me go back to you again, Mbak Fifi, because at a certain point in time, and actually up to this point as well, we hope for Indonesia to be leading within the region, that is Southeast Asia, which has been established within the ASEAN or the Southeast Asian Nations Network. So what more can you tell us about the positions of Indonesia, who assumed the chairmanship just last year, and now by Cambodia, next year by Malaysia, for us to position ourselves in the region, not only being the largest country with the biggest populations, but also economic-wise, which has now been eclipsed by Singapore.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, because I think it's difficult to separate, Indonesia's bilateral relations with Singapore without looking at it from the perspective of the region. Then the role that these two countries, the important roles that these two countries play in ASEAN. And I do think, Indonesia and Singapore are two of the founding members of ASEAN, and I think they both play equally important roles in the regional organization. And I do think also that the future of ASEAN remains in the hands of these important countries like Indonesia and Singapore. So, and I think Indonesia continues to wish to play a leadership role in ASEAN. And to a large degree, it needs the support of countries like Singapore, like Malaysia, like the Philippines, to ensure that such role can be played meaningfully and efficiently in ASEAN, and also to ensure that regional security and stability remains intact.
But if we are speaking of the future, Mbak Fifi, I'm just curious, in your opinion, how will our President-elect Prabowo Subianto bring us there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've heard from some of his statements during the campaign and how he views Indonesia both regionally and globally. So, and I think it's only natural for a country like Indonesia to want to continue to play such a role. I don't think it matters who the leader of Indonesia is. Indonesia is already put in such a position that it needs to play an important role in Southeast Asia, because it's such a dominant, biggest country in the region. And I think ASEAN depends quite a lot on Indonesia, the same way that Indonesia also depends on ASEAN to be a vehicle for its foreign policy.
And I also believe that, the characteristics of our leaders, so President Joko Widodo and as well as PM Lee Hsien Loong, they're both very outgoing, they're very friendly. I'm just curious, how is the future going to look like later on with President-elect Prabowo Subianto, as well as the next Prime Minister of Singapore, Lawrence Wong?
Sure, it's quite hard to predict, right? But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the relationship between Joko Widodo and Lee Hsien Loong has been, by a lot of media portrayed as bromance, for example,
bromance,
because
exactly.
they do have a very good working relationships, and I think we view that every year whenever there is a leaders retreat between Indonesia and Singapore, they always come up, or they always result in very concrete outcome. So yeah, in the future, I really can't predict. It's interesting that both will be new leaders being sworn in within this year. So we can only hope for the best, I think.
But you also mentioned, Fifi, that the future Prime Minister of Singapore, Lawrence Wong, is also here. He tagged along the entourage, meaning that he'll have the time to be also in conversation with Prabowo Subianto. If we looked at the pictures that we aired just recently at the high tea sessions, we have there seated the Prime Minister the current Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Hsien Loong. Alongside him is Lawrence Wong. And also we have President Jokowi on the other end of the table. Alongside him, next to him is Prabowo Subianto. It's a bit like we're meeting now. This is how we do the annual retreats. And you guys are going to take our torch and do exactly this in the future. What do you make of these moments?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but also very logical in a way. So Lawrence Wong will be sworn in 50th of May, so just in 3 weeks, I think. Yeah, just a couple of weeks away. So there's going to be a transition in terms of he will be on par with Jokowi for the next 5 months, so to say. So Jokowi is not, Prabowo is not going to be sworn in until October.
Yeah.
So there is a chance for sort of like a transition in a way, but I do think that, for countries like Indonesia and Singapore, this sort of transition should be done smoothly. I mean, in a way, the bilateral relations have had a long history, ups and downs, and I think, I'm not too worried about it.
All right. I'd like to go again to the Vice Director of INDEF, Mas Eko Listianto. Mas Eko, can you still hear us loud and clear?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Clear.
Yeah, okay. Mas Eko, one of the biggest homework for Indonesia at this point in time from the economic perspective is to get out of the middle income trap. That is also one of the biggest and head-scratching homework for our Finance Minister, Sri Mulyani. And Singapore has managed to do just that for a very long time. What are the lessons learned here?
Yeah, I think this is a good cooperation because we want to become a developed country in 2045. And at the other side, we will improve our cooperation with the developed country. So we will take a lot of lesson learned, I think, from this cooperation. And also because Singapore is maybe become our imagination in 2045, right? Because they
Golden Indonesia.
Golden Indonesia.
Yeah, they have a good income per capita or GDP per capita, about maybe more than 15 times than Indonesia. It's a big number. So we will learn a lot of things. I think a lot of lessons we will try to implement in our development. But I think in some area we can push this lesson learned because if we want become a developed country, we need to push our, of course, talking about Singapore is talking about how to push their quality of human resource. And also, if we want to become a developed country, we must also push our human resource, especially in the competitiveness. And the second is about the focus on sustainability development, because Singapore is a country with not just if Singapore cooperate with the other country, they of course they will try to get the advantage. I mean in financial aspect, but the other thing is they are also concerned about sustainability, about the planet, not just profit, planet and people also they try to develop in same time. So I think for Indonesia that we know that like in our governance we still below if we compare to Singapore. So this so many area we can improve to make sure in 2045 we will become developed country like Singapore right now, I think.
I'm just curious, Mas Eko, you mentioned just now that there are areas to be improved by Indonesia to follow Singapore footsteps, especially now that we have the Golden Indonesia in mind to achieve in 2045. What sectors are we actually talking about here? What would be the priorities for Indonesia to improve? And what kind of lessons can we learn from Singapore so far?
Yeah, I think sustainable development is become a big chance for us to become developed country. So this is one sector that can become our future cooperation, especially in practical. We know that Singapore always compete with the regulation, also in term of sustainable development. uh, right now we have ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and in every corporate in Singapore always uh, implement this ESG in their activity. So I think we can try to push also in Indonesia to make sure that every corporate will also implement their ESG. So when these two country deeper in cooperation, especially in economic, I mean, corporation in Indonesia also become easy to get finance, to get a loan from Singapore, because we have a same standard like in ESG. Because if we compare right now, the implementation of ESG between Indonesia and Singapore, it's so different, I think. Singapore, especially in a banking sector, they always try to push this sustainable issue. But in Indonesia, we know that our financial sector is still, yes, there's so many gap in this sector, between banking and non-banking. Between I think the concern also in banking is still just how to make a profit, not to also to develop our planet and also people. So I think in this area we can push, yeah, especially in SG. I'm optimism that one day, if we push this sector, we will get a lot of advantage from this cooperation.
All right. Mas Eko, it's interesting when you mentioned that sustainability has been one of the biggest focuses of Singapore to make advancements. And so is the case for Indonesia, because the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, for a lot of countries, not only Indonesia and Singapore, have been trying to make strides as well and to reach those goals by 2030. So where are we now at this point in time in terms of getting closer to these SDG goals, Mas Eko? Because as we know, Singapore is a trading hub globally, and Indonesia has yet to manage to be one, but rather we are going towards the path of being a manufacturing and industrial hub. So sustainability and keeping up with industrializations have been quite a challenging task for our country. So where do we find the common ground here?
Yeah, Pak Rahmat, yeah, we talking about SDGs, it's I think the key keyword for this situation is the consistency, and also the consistency of the implementation of SDGs itself. Because if we compare between Singapore and Indonesia, I researched in Indonesia about 17 point about SDGs. In so many aspects, until now we cannot achieve the target, because there are so many challenges in there. But this is our future. So to make sure the balance of the social, economic, and also environment, we need to make sure that in the future we will implement this SDG. We will achieve all of this target. But so far, because maybe because we are a developing country, there are so many, I say, like we cannot implement this SDG, because maybe from the bureaucracy itself, there is no enough monitoring and evaluation, and also from the private sector. Also, this is just like uh, actually not every private sector try to compete with this the target. Also, we have a big problem in how to implement the SDGs. Yeah. Compared to Singapore, because actually because the governance in Singapore is good, so every regulation in there always implemented with the punishment, with the and also with the incentive too. So it's make sure that this country become a developed country. So how to make sure this Indonesia also become developed country? I think yeah, we try to implement our target, our regulation. It will if we implement this good, yeah, I think it is possible
Right.
Indonesia to become a big country.
I think Mas
But
Eko
maybe
just give
one
a
point that
yeah.
I will edit it in this situation is about the so far Indonesia is just a market for Singapore. So I think to make sure that this cooperation will equal, so we need to push that Indonesia not just a market, but also we can accelerate our cooperation, yeah, like in industrial sector, in industrial area, in also in education.
Wow. There are so much room for improvement
That's right.
between Indonesia and Singapore. And I think Mas Eko gave a very good point right there that what we are really lacking, like what we need to improve is actually good governance.
That's
I mean,
right.
like we can have so many plans in the future, we can have so many regulation, but if it's not implemented properly, I mean, none of this will be success.
That's right. And we only have 6 years to go before 2030. And those goals of sustainability have been very, very elusive up to this point. And not only in the case of Indonesia, but also a lot of other countries are striving to get those sustainability goals. Let me go over again to Mbak Fifi. Mbak Fifi, there's one thing that's quite intriguing for us Indonesians who are not very familiar, or it has not yet become a common knowledge for us all, in terms of having a prime minister as the top leader of the government of Singapore. But on the other side, Singapore also has a president. Pretty much, I don't know the case with other countries. I mean, monarch countries for that matter, when they have a queen or a king and then a prime minister. But in German, they have the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, but also a president, President Steinmeier. Walk us through these governmental structures that they have in Singapore compared to our very own here in Indonesia.
Yeah, of course, it's completely different types of government, a different type of country. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not very familiar for us to for a country to have a president and a prime minister.
Yeah. Which
yeah.
one is more powerful? So brings us to
Sure,
question.
because if you want to put it into Indonesian context, our president is both kepala negara and kepala pemerintahan.
Head of state and head of government.
Exactly. So, and it's the same way. So, in countries like Singapore or countries with monarch, then those two positions or two roles are divided into two different offices. So in Singapore, so definitely the prime minister is the kepala pemerintahan. So he is the one in charge with running the country. So
The
if
cabinets and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to use solely, it might differ from countries to countries, but if you want to use solely Singapore as an example, then the president is bound for more ceremonial duties, you know, things like the same way as monarch would function in some countries as well, for ceremonial duties, welcoming other state leaders, for example. So and the rest of the governing function is fully done by the prime minister. Yeah.
Okay. So in a way, when it comes to making governmental relations and G2G, it is in the
prime
hands
minister.
of the
Yeah.
prime minister. The president of Singapore also newly elected of an Indian descent, and previously we have Ibu Halimah, which is the Malay descent. And that was quite also a sight within the elections of the president, because there's this sheer amount of warmth and support from the local people towards the presidents, as opposed to something that we're very aware of elections when it becomes contentious, it's political affairs. So what do we know more about these type of presidential elections of Singapore?
Yeah, there is no election. So
There
to
is
say.
no
Yeah,
election. More like an appointment, would you
yeah,
say?
exactly. So for the president itself is an appointment basically. So and for the prime minister, it's not left to the to the political party in charge to come up with the next leader, so to say. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's for Singapore, the presidential role is also set because, like I mentioned, it's mostly for ceremonial duties as well, and also represents. I think this is very interesting and very characteristic of Singapore. It represents sort of like the face of the multicultural society of Singapore, and which is something that I don't think could be carried over by the prime minister's role, for example. So, and I do think that is a very characteristic of Singapore.
Yeah. It's the manifestations of harmony in diversity that is illustrated by the top government.
Yeah, but I wonder what is the secret though. I mean, like Singaporeans, they really look up to their Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. I mean, he's been in the office for the past 20 years. What do you think would be his, is it his persona, his charm?
He's such a warm figure, isn't he? I mean, I love just the way how he speaks to public, how eloquent, the choice of words is very calming, he's never emotional in a sense, even though, I mean, I remember exactly during the time of the pandemic how calming his speeches were, and such a figure that Singaporeans will miss. I mean, you said 20 years.
They listen to their Prime Minister really well.
Exactly, there's going to be quite a change.
What's your opinion?
Yeah. Sure, I mean, I think this is a question that should be asked to a Singaporean. But I do think...
Unless we want to be Singaporeans after this, we need to know that.
Yeah, but I do think, you know, a country like Singapore, it really treasures stability. So if a leader can bring about, you know, stability, very minimum level of crisis, for example, either be a financial crisis or housing crisis or any type of crisis, if they can bring it to a very, very minimum level, then it would be a very popular leader. But then again, I guess to be fair, you know, sometimes from the outside looking in, things can be also rosy and everything. But I think if you talk to the general public in Singapore, that might be different.
Exactly, the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. Exactly.
And we also want to get your words later on after the commercial break, Mbak Fifi. Your take on the upcoming Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. What sort of differences and dynamics he'll bring over to the table for the Singaporeans?
All right, so stay tuned on our TVRI World Special Report. We'll be right back just after this break. Special report with me, Luisa Kusnandar and Rahmat Idris right here. And we are still with Shafia Muhibat, Deputy Executive Director for Research at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS. And also on the line, we have Mas Eko Listianto, the Vice Director of Institute for Development of Economic and Finance, or INDEF. Mas Eko, you're still with us?
Yes, yeah.
All right, so we've been talking about political relations, and we would like to delve deeper into the economic challenges and relations between Indonesia and Singapore. Now, Mas Eko, as you know, Singapore has been Indonesia's top foreign investor since the year of 2014. That's way back then. And what should the Indonesian government do then to further attract Singapore investors and also to employ more workers in the country? As we mentioned just now, that human resource is also a big issue here.
Yeah, I think Singapore become the biggest investor for our country is the fact that they interest with our economic performance, I think. So what we will do is of course, to maintain to make sure the investor from Singapore always come to our country, we need to maintain our economic performance, especially in macroeconomic aspect. Like we need to make sure that our inflation always under control by the government, and also of course, our exchange rates. Yeah, that's today we face the fluctuation in our exchange rates, and the other sector that we can improve to make sure that more and more investor come to Indonesia. As we know that Singapore interested in some area, especially in like an transportation, communication, and also industrial area, housing, electricity. I think it's so many area we can improve, we can develop to invite more investor from Singapore to join with our project or our infrastructure in the future. But maybe we still face some challenge in some area, because we know yeah, so far in so many sector in Indonesia, it's not have a good competitiveness compared to the other sector. I mean, like if we invite Singapore to come to our financial sector, it's not a big issue, because our financial sector always open with foreign investor. But in some area, like maybe in electricity or maybe in housing or industrial area, we still face some challenge, like how to make sure that they will also get a profit, because like if we invite investor from Singapore to our new capital city, we need to make sure that there is million people in there, maybe in the I mean in the future, but with a good roadmap to make sure that they will also join. I think so far so many commitment from Singapore to invest in our new capital city, but how to make sure that they will spend their money in there? We need to make sure that there is a good, like a fundamental indicator that will make the investor interested with our plan.
Yeah, I get your point. Basically, we need to ensure them of their
Yeah.
investments here in Indonesia. And as you know, Mas Eko, Singapore investors have been invited to be involved in our future capital city Nusantara. Then what facilities as well as what incentives should our government do to provide and encourage them to take investment opportunities?
Right, but before you answer that, Mas Eko, we're going to go to Bogor Presidential Palace now to listen into the press conference by the two leaders. Let's have a listen in.
Continue to bring the relationship to greater heights. May Singapore-Indonesia ties continue to flourish far into the future, or as you would say, Maju Jaya. Thank you very much. Thank you.
End of joint press statement. The President of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore will proceed to Garuda Hall for a luncheon, followed by members of the official delegation.
Right, we catch the tail of it there, of the press conference, and the very common phrases over in Singapore, the Maju Jaya.
Maju Jaya.
Glorious and prosperity. We caught that glimpse, which is a big hope for the relations between Indonesia and Singapore. You also mentioned flourishing in the future. We didn't. That's pretty much the gist of it. We didn't get the rest of it though. But Fifi, how hopeful are we to see the flourishing relations between Indonesia, aside from all of the homeworks, that details that we need to iron out in terms of extraditions and the defense cooperations? How hopeful are we here?
Well, I think we should be hopeful. And there will always be problems in the bilateral relations, that's for sure. But I don't think there's anything that cannot be managed well by the two countries. And I think both President Jokowi and PM Lee has set a good precedence of creating this leaders retreat
Right,
since
7 times.
exactly
That should
since
say something.
2017. So I think it's a good precedent already, and I think something that could be, you know, that should be followed up by the next leaders as well, because it has proved to be very fruitful and very efficient in managing some of the issues between the two countries. And I think, you know, just seeing from this, you know, this past few years of experience, we should be very hopeful to the future.
Right, and over to you with the postponed questions, Mas Eko. We believe that during the hour-long conversations between the two state leaders, the topic of IKN, our prospective new capital, is on the table. We believe Indonesia is continuously seeking investments from friendly countries, notably Singapore is in the map. How do you think we should incentivize this cooperation to have more money coming in from Singapore to the IKN project?
Actually, the best guarantee to make sure that investor from Singapore will come to IKN or our new capital city is the number of the citizen in there. Yeah, I mean, if there are
1 million.
millions people in there, the investor will come, and I think not just from Singapore but also the other country. But maybe the second incentive that we need to push is about taxation. Maybe about the regional taxation in there, special taxation in there, because we know one of the competitiveness of the Singapore in business sector is the tax is so low compared to the other ASEAN countries. So I think if we want to investor from Singapore join with our project or IKN project, so we need to make sure that the taxation is also easy for them, yeah, also cheap for them. I mean, cheap, it's relative, but yeah, I think competitive, yeah, for them. So it will make it will make sure that the investor from Singapore will join with our project in IKN, because actually so many area in IKN related to the preference of Singapore investor, like transportation, electricity, and also the best tagline is sustainable development, because both of Singapore right now and also IKN in the future, I think will push, will develop their strategy to make sure that the city will become a sustainable city or sustainable development
All
in that.
right. Okay, Mas Eko, we will talk furthermore about the IKN, but at the moment, let's go back to the screen where we'll be listening to the press conference that is happening at the President Palace in Bogor.
For Maritime Affairs and Investment of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, and the Senior Minister and Coordinating Minister for National Security of the Republic of Singapore, His Excellency Mr. Teo Chee Hean. Thank you, Excellencies. Please show the MOU to the press. Thank you, Excellencies. Please show the MOU to the press. Next, kindly return to your previous positions. Second, Indonesia-Singapore joint update on defense cooperation. To sign and exchange the documents, we would like to invite the Minister of Defense of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Prabowo Subianto, and the Minister of Defense of the Republic of Singapore, His Excellency Mr. Ng Eng Hen. Thank you, Excellencies. Please show the MOU to the press. Next, kindly return to your previous positions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the MOU signing ceremony. Next, we will announce 3 memorandum of understanding that have been signed by the government of Indonesia and the government of Singapore. First, memorandum of understanding on cooperation on digital transformation. Second, the extension of bilateral financial arrangement between Bank Indonesia and Monetary Authority of Singapore that comprises of 1, the amendment agreement to the local currency bilateral swap agreement. 2, the 6th amendment letter to the memorandum of understanding on repurchase transaction line. Third, memorandum of understanding concerning human resources development cooperation in the field of pharmaceuticals. In addition, the government of Indonesia and the government of Singapore have already agreed to launch a pilot project as the implementation of Memorandum of Understanding on the Indonesia-Singapore Tech Program. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have concluded the signing ceremony and the announcement of pre-signed Memorandum of Understanding. May these agreements will strengthen the bilateral relations between Indonesia and Singapore. Next, the President of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore will proceed to holding room for the preparation of joint press statement.
Well, there you have it, the moments of signings of 3 memorandums of understanding between Indonesia and Singapore, covering a variety of topics and sectors, further strengthening the flourishing bilateral relations between Indonesia and Singapore. Louisa.
That's right. Now, okay, if we can go back to Fifi and talk about all the sectors that have been signed just now, the memorandum of agreement. What do you have to say about it?
I think it's most of it is a continuation of ongoing programs, ongoing work that has been done in the past at least 10 years, I think. So, for example, the defense cooperation that was signed, I think it's an extension of the ones that has been agreed upon in the previous years, which covers a lot of areas related to defense between Indonesia and Singapore. And I think the other sectors on the digital transformation, financial cooperation, I think Pak Eko will be able to explain that a little bit further. But I do think, you know, this shows that, you know, some of the work that has been done, some of the types of cooperation, it shows that this has to be done, you know, through a long process, because, like I said, the defense cooperation has been discussed for at least 20 years. And I think it's, some people might say it's a slow process, but looking at the steps that has been made, I think we're moving in the right direction.
That's good to hear.
That's a lot to look forward still in the military and the defense cooperations between Indonesia and Singapore. And let's head back to you, Mas Eko, on the other side of our conversation here. First, it's digital transformations, and then the financial transactions there. The third point, the third memorandum of understanding, I would like to get that a little bit deeper from you, because it involves the two central banks of Indonesia and Singapore, and also pertaining to the local currencies of each country. What more can you tell us about this, particularly when it comes to the transactions, be it online or other sort of transactions between Indonesia and Singapore? Mas Eko.
Progress in one of the Bank Indonesia focus, that is about the LCT, or we call it local currency transaction.
Okay.
So
apologies, I'm going to have to pause you there because we have a live feed coming in from the palace right now as both leaders are about to make the statements. Let's listen in.
Selamat datang kembali di Indonesia, dan Indonesia merasa terhormat menjadi tuan rumah Leaders Retreat tahun 2024, di mana ini adalah Leaders Retreat yang ke-7 kita, dan merupakan sinyal kuat bagi kontinuitas kerjasama kedua negara Singapura dan Indonesia. Tadi saya dengan PM Lee telah membahas beberapa hal. Yang pertama di bidang politik dan pertahanan, kami menyambut baik telah berjalannya implementasi perjanjian VIR, pertahanan dan ekstradisi yang kedepannya perlu dipastikan implementasinya berjalan penuh. Yang kedua di bidang ekonomi telah kita tawarkan beberapa peluang-peluang investasi, manufaktur tekstil di Kendal Industrial Park, kemudian ekonomi hijau melalui infrastruktur yang berkelanjutan dan pembangunan pusat data di Nongsa Batam. Saya juga mengapresiasi antusiasme 29 perusahaan Singapura dalam investasi di IKN, dan saya mengharap dukungan pembangunan PLTS di IKN Nusantara. Rencana ekspor listrik ke Singapura terus didorong, termasuk investasi industri hijau pendukung. Dan terkait ketahanan pangan, kami sepakat untuk mendorong kerjasama transfer teknologi dan pertukaran iptek pengolahan pangan. Dan untuk kerjasama produk halal, Indonesia mengundang Singapura untuk menjadi pengembang 3 kawasan industri halal, yaitu di Bintan, di Serang, dan di Sidoarjo. Yang ketiga, di bidang sosial budaya, kami telah membahas penguatan transformasi kesehatan melalui investasi pembangunan rumah sakit dan klinik, pengembangan kapasitas tenaga medis, digitalisasi kesehatan, dan pengembangan KEK kesehatan di Bali. Terkait pendidikan, Indonesia telah menyampaikan pentingnya reaktivasi kelompok kerja bersama, dan saya juga mengundang Singapura untuk hadir di World Water Forum ke-10 di Bali. Terakhir, kami juga berdiskusi mengenai persoalan isu kawasan dan global. Kami sepakat terus untuk mendorong terciptanya perdamaian di Timur Tengah dan berupaya untuk terus memperkuat sentralitas ASEAN. Selanjutnya dengan hormat saya mengundang PM Lee Hsien Loong untuk menyampaikan pernyataannya. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency President Joko Widodo, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I thank President Jokowi for his warm hospitality. This is my 7th Leaders Retreat with President Jokowi. We hold these retreats annually, except during the COVID years, and it is a signal of the high level attention we have both paid to our bilateral ties. It's only natural that we do so because we are close neighbors and we are good friends with many common interests. This year's retreat is particularly special because it's the final one for both President Jokowi and me. And I'm very grateful that President Jokowi has made a special effort to host me and to have me here just a few weeks before I hand over for my last official visit as Prime Minister. Over the last decade, we've made excellent progress in bilateral cooperation in partnership with President Jokowi and his team. We have shared a commitment to deepening mutual understanding and to building strong relationships at all levels. Our defense cooperation has been regular and extensive, The joint update on defense cooperation we signed today reflects our robust defense ties. It gives me particular satisfaction because not only during the time when I was Prime Minister, but even before that as a minister, and even before that when I was in the military serving as a serviceman, I have been working with Indonesia and with the TNI, and before that with ABRI, and I'm very glad to see that these good relations have prospered and reached this stage today. Our economic ties have been another pillar of the relationship. Investments from Singapore to Indonesia have increased steadily, and cumulatively they are exceeding 74 billion Singapore dollars. We've also taken steps to deepen our digital economy cooperation. Earlier this year, we signed an MOU on cooperation on digital transformation, and now we are following up on the TechX program, which will encourage young tech professionals to gain valuable exposure in Singapore and in Indonesia. We look forward to Indonesia driving the green economy in our region. Bilaterally, we are making good progress in facilitating cross-border electricity trading, and we are exploring carbon capture and storage. We also signed an MOU on community empowerment in mangrove ecosystems just a few minutes ago, and I have suggested to President Jokowi that next we should look at the possibility of carbon nets. As close neighbors, trust and mutual understanding between us make all the difference. At our fourth leaders retreat before COVID in 2019, President Jokowi and I agreed it was time to work towards resolving some long-standing issues in airspace, defense, and extradition. We completed these agreements and they went into force last month. I thank President Jokowi and his ministers for their role in bringing these three agreements to fruition. They show that when we work together in a spirit of friendship and openness, we can address even the most complicated issues in a pragmatic and mutually beneficial manner. As this is my last leaders retreat with President Jokowi, I would like to especially take this opportunity to acknowledge his contributions to Indonesia and to the region. With vision and leadership, he has put Indonesia on a strong economic trajectory, confident and optimistic about its path ahead, and raised ASEAN's standing as a participant in international affairs with a view which is worth listening to and with a contribution which will make a difference. It has brought stability and progress to Indonesia and to the entire region. Indonesia is ASEAN's largest economy. When Indonesia prospers, the region prospers. Under President Jokowi, Indonesia has been a constructive voice in a divided world, as we witnessed during Indonesia's recent leadership of the G20 and also its recent chairmanship of ASEAN. I'm honored to have had the privilege to work with President Jokowi throughout these years during his 2 terms as president. While this retreat is a fitting occasion to reflect and celebrate what we have achieved together, it's also about continuity and looking ahead. Typically, we hold 4-eye meetings at the retreats between the 2 leaders. But this year, we were glad to have an 8-eye meeting instead with Pak Prabowo and DPM Lawrence joining us. From the present leadership to the next, we committed to look ahead, to build on the strong foundation, and to expand our cooperation. I'm glad that President Jokowi and I are handing over the bilateral relationship in good state to our successors. And I have every confidence that Pak Prabowo and DPM Lawrence will continue to bring the relationship to greater heights. May Singapore-Indonesia ties continue to flourish far into the future, or as you would say, Maju Jaya. Thank you very much. Thank you.
End of joint press statement. The President of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore will proceed to Garuda Hall for a luncheon, followed by members of the official delegation.
There you have it, the joint press statement delivered by President of Indonesia Joko Widodo and the outgoing Prime Minister of Singapore Lee Hsien Loong, further highlighting some of the cooperating sectors between Indonesia and Singapore, and big hopes from Prime Ministers of Singapore on the flourishing relations between the two countries. Lisa.
And I like how he said that this is like, it's actually like passing on the baton, you know, from one leadership to the next, and we're all hoping for a better relationship between Indonesia and Singapore for the future. Now, if we can just go back to Mas Eko. Mas Eko, just now, the Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong have mentioned a number of discussion about what kind of relationship Indonesia and Singapore is going to have in the future. In particular, they mentioned about digital transformation and also about the future of Nusantara City. Now, in terms of digital transformation, Mas Eko, what fields Singapore can both cooperate in technology and innovation to help push the digital transformation in Indonesia?
Okay, but Lisa, I think this is a wide cooperation if we talk about digitalization, especially in a current issue about Singapore and Indonesia. Most of our startup in Indonesia always try to find capital, try to find finance or loan or something that that will make their startup become a bigger. They try to find the funding from to Singapore. So I think with this cooperation, we hope that not just in Singapore, maybe in Jakarta also become a new hub for the startup company. I think not just in Indonesia, but also in ASEAN. So I think this is one challenge, how to make sure that also that not just Singapore but also Jakarta will become the next hub for the startup, especially in financing their project. And the other aspect is about I think we need to improve our quality of e-commerce, especially because most of the e-commerce in Indonesia not I mean they not sell goods and things from the SMEs, but from the big company. So in the future, with this cooperation in digitalization, we hope that our e-commerce also more support to our SMEs, to make sure that we will have advantage but in this country. And the other thing is, I think about it is also about the transformation of the technology that is like I said before, LCT, local currency transaction, will with this cooperation we will have a chance to make sure if the tourists from Indonesia or also businessmen in Indonesia buy something in Singapore, we can use our rupiah, and also vice versa. If Singaporean buy something in Indonesia, they can use Singapore dollar. So it will reduce our dependency to US dollar. Yeah. And this is, I think, a good improvement in our transformation in transaction. And also the wide area, yeah. So many area, I think, include the in health sector. We know we also have cooperation in this area.
Right, Mas Eko, we almost come to the end of our program here on TVR World. Just one final statement from you in regards of the cooperations between the two central banks of Indonesia and Singapore. That was also highlighted in one of the MOUs, and how we can go better and improve against the art of the weakening Indonesian rupiah against US dollars. And also, just to quote PM Loong, he said that we hope to see great heights in terms of bilateral relations between Indonesia and Singapore. And he also says kudos there to President Joko Widodo that has such significant contributions in making Indonesia and bringing Indonesia into a strong economic trajectory, pretty much something that we've been discussing of following suit Singaporeans' advancement. Just one final remarks from you.
Okay, my closing statement that this is a good chance for Indonesia and also for Singapore to make a closer this cooperation in some area, especially in economic, because we need to make sure that in 2045 we will become developed country. One strategy to achieve become a developed country is try to close with the developed country itself. One of the developed countries in ASEAN is Singapore, so I think this is the right strategy. But we need to make sure that all of MOU that we have signed today will implement it with detailed target and also with the monitoring and evaluation that make sure that step by step we will become a developed country as we purpose in our long-term planning.
That's good. I mean, like, we are getting there into becoming a developed country, and our target goal is 2045. Thank you, Mas Eko, for your thoughts. And if we can just come back here to Mbak Vivi. Mbak Vivi, we've listened to the press conference just now, what Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong have to say and what President Joko Widodo have to say. Do you have any closing statement?
Yeah, I think we can see very clearly from the statement the good state of bilateral relations between Indonesia and Singapore, and I think it was quite interesting that Prime Minister Lee highlighted specifically on the future of cooperation between the incoming PM Wong and the President-elect Prabowo Subianto, and I think the words that he used was. It will bring the bilateral relations to new heights. So I think that's quite an optimistic outlook from his side.
Yeah. It's a remark to Lawrence Wong as well.
Yeah.
So passing the buttons, as you said.
Yes.
Well, that caps off our conversations. This is all the time that we have with you. Would like to express our gratitude again, Deputy Executive Director for Research of CSIS, Shafia F. Muhibat, and also on the other side of the conversations, the Vice Director of INDEF, Eko Listianto. Thank you both very much for your time and your insights for the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us here on our special report today on TVRI World. We wish you a very good day. I am Luisa Kusnandar.
And I'm Rahmat Idris. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.